Thanks.
I want to thank the Independents for putting this motion. I think we need to go back a couple of years to the major row we had in this country with its population over water charges, because what came out of that was an agreement or a vote in this chamber in 2017 for a sort of a fudge on the whole issue, and the main fudge was on the question of public ownership of our water utilities. There is a bill before the House for a referendum on the privatisation, on the public ownership of water, in order to avoid forever the privatisation or the possibility of privatisation of our water services, but that has been left sitting on the shelf. And here, I think, is the roots of a big mistake by the government, that after a major campaign to defeat water charges, the election to this House of quite a number of deputies, including myself, on the backs of the communities we represented during that, that the government just let it sit there. Now Darragh O'Brien wants to rush through the ending of service level agreement to workers which are guaranteed till 2035. 2025, he wants to end those by the beginning of next year and transfer all local authority workers over to Irish Water as a single utility. It ain't going to happen. It ain't going to happen. I have never seen as much sentiment in resistance to being moved, forcibly moved from a public sector job into a private utility. And I want to quote the workers at the recent Forza conference. If workers are forced to transfer to Irish Water against their will, their anger and alienation will create a failed entity, a mortally wounded service and a public policy debacle to dwarf previous protests over Irish Water. And indeed that follows hot on the heels of an OECD report that says that the government need to consider the reintroduction of water charges. Interestingly, that OECD report also recommended that on the question of the environment that the government set a specific target to reduce biomethane associated with the size of the livestock herd in this country. Not mentioned at all. All they mention is the reintroduction of water charges, because yet again the government wants to make people, ordinary people, pay through the nose so that they can privatise this utility. And therein lies the problem. There is a tension between outsourcing the work that needs to be done on wastewater and on the provision of water services throughout the country, outsourcing that to private entities and running it through the local authorities. And the local authorities have been stripped of their power and stripped of their funding. And just to give you an idea of what that means, on average, the EU spend on local authority funding is 22% of government budgets. Here, it's 8%. Think about that the next time you see smelly water running down the streets of Arklow or Cahersiveen or anywhere else. They're deliberately underfunding the local authorities in order to privatise.
Deputy Paul Murphy, 3 minutes.
Thanks, Caroline. We've decades of underinvestment in our water infrastructure now, and that underinvestment continues. And the danger is that that underinvestment will be used as another excuse, again, to try and bring in water charges that still won't resolve the underinvestment. Last week, the OECD were out calling for the reintroduction of water charges in Ireland. I think, in case the government gets the wrong idea, they have to be put on notice that any attempt to reintroduce water charges will be met with a massive campaign of boycott and people power, which would bring this government down. Because people know that any water charges have nothing to do with conservation and everything to do with privatisation. When Labour and Fine Gael attempted to bring in this austerity tax, what they actually managed to do was to waste literally hundreds of millions of euros on PR, on consultants, and on unnecessary water meters. That's money that would have been much better spent actually fixing the creaking water network, installing district meters to detect leaks. Instead of austerity charges on working people, we need to be tackling the big business water wasters, including the data centres which can use up to 4.5 million litres of water a day. Instead of greenwashing austerity, we should be taxing the billionaires who have profited out of the COVID crisis and investing that money in a green jobs programme, including upgrading our water network. There's a question to be posed, which is why is the government refusing to hold a referendum to prohibit privatisation of our water services? It was a major demand of the movement 5 years ago. It was something that the government at the time said it had no problem with, said it supported, and yet 5 years on, it has still not been done. The question it poses is whether the government and the right-wing parties are still harbouring pipe dreams of selling off our water network into the future. Now the government is facing serious industrial action by the water workers themselves as they attempt to force them out of their current jobs in the councils into the Irish water semi-state. These workers correctly have major fears over the long-term impact of this on their rights and conditions at work, but also their continuing fear that Irish Water could be sold off to Dennis O'Brien or Veolia or some other private company down the road. The government should drop this harebrained scheme, keep the workers where they are, protect their terms and conditions, and finally hold the referendum to prohibit privatisation of our water services and actually invest in fixing our water infrastructure.
Thanks, Deputy McBarry.